Hola, estudiantes! So you have learned the preterite tense, you've learned the imperfect tense, you know what the verb endings are for both of those tenses. You know that with the preterite tense, there are just tons of irregulars, and that's something that just takes a ton of practice. With the imperfect tense, you've learned that there are only 3 irregulars. You know what the conjugations are to go with those. We know that they're both past tenses, but then you might be a little bit confused as to the difference. So I want to remind you, with the preterite tense, these would be actions that only happened once, or things that were repeated a specific number of times. So maybe I called you 3 times and you never picked up, but I called 3 times. That would be preterite tense. Something that was a chain of events. So we can see I've got investigué, escribí, imprimí, and entregué. So these are just a list of things that happened. And then also actions that have a stated beginning and end point. So it's just kind of one-time things, things that I feel like kind of fit into a box of time. You also have a lot of helpful words that go with the preterite tense. So these are big hints that, at least for the most part, if you see these and you're confused, it'd be a pretty good bet that you're in the preterite tense. So una vez, one time, that's pretty clear. It's an action that only happened once. Yesterday, last night, this morning, this afternoon, last week. So you can see it's just got specific points in time. And then if it's a certain number of days ago or weeks ago or years ago or even months ago, and then entonces, that kind of goes back to the chain of events. So I did this, and then I did this other thing. So those are big hints that you're in the preterite tense. And then with the imperfect tense, it says habitual actions. That just means actions that used to happen consistently. So when I was a kid, I used to play video games. So I did that pretty frequently. Actions that happened when something else occurred, and that is something that you will be working on a little bit later. Jorge was sleeping when the telephone rang. So the telephone ringing actually is preterite tense. That happened one time while he was sleeping. So that's the imperfect tense. So it's kind of the bigger event that was going on when it got interrupted by some preterite event. Also, dates and times are the imperfect tense. So if you see a date in there, if you see a time in there, people's ages, you'll see a lot of times when I was 12 years old, I used to do this thing. We actually have that here also, when I was a child. So it doesn't have to be numbers, but, you know, giving a specific age or a roundabout age when I was a kid, those are going to go with imperfect tense. And then descriptions of characteristics, emotions, conditions, then you're going to be in the imperfect tense. So the imperfect also has some pretty helpful words. And again, if you see these, you're more likely to be in the imperfect tense. So a veces, sometimes I used to do this thing. A menudo, I oftentimes, frequently, always, generally, all the time. You can see these phrases are much more general. It's not saying at this specific point in time. It's just saying sometimes this happened. So all of these are pretty good indicators that you most likely are in the imperfect tense. Now let's look at some sentences that are in the past tenses. These are both correct. Yo comí helado and yo comía helado. Both of those are talking about me eating ice cream in the past. The difference is that comí is preterite tense and comía is imperfect tense. So if we said yo comí helado, that's the preterite tense. And remember, preterite tense, we're sticking inside this time frame box. So that would translate as I ate ice cream. And then we could maybe add something to that. I ate ice cream yesterday. I ate ice cream after lunch today. But it would be a more specific time. Where comía helado is more typically I used to eat ice cream. Or maybe we would translate that as I ate ice cream every Sunday when I visited my grandmother, or something like that. But it has a more indefinite, as far as the time goes, an indefinite feel. It used to happen all the time, or I generally would eat ice cream when I went to the specific place. And then let's look at this next one. Mi amiga estudió. So that would be my friend, and then it's talking about her studying in the past tense for both of those. So mi amiga estudió or mi amiga estudiaba. So either way, it's my friend studying in the past. With estudió, that would be, again, in a time frame box. So my friend studied. She just studied the one time. She typically doesn't study, but she decided to study last night. Or maybe she generally does study, but she specifically studied for the math exam. So that would be a more definite time. And again, we can add to that. My friend studied last night. And then mi amiga estudiaba, we could say my friend used to study. She used to study every Sunday night before school started the next day. Or maybe she used to study math. So that's definitely more general as far as when she studied. It probably happened more than once. So that is the difference between the preterite tense and the imperfect tense. There will be more later as far as using those together in the same sentence. For now, let's just practice using them in sentences with things that only happened one time with that preterite tense, or more generally happened with that imperfect tense.